What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Conor McGregor offers advice to Alexander Volkanovski ahead of lightweight title fight. After Islam Makhachev secured the UFC lightweight championship by defeating Charles Oliveira in the main event of UFC 280, pound-for-pound kingpin Alexander Volkanovski entered the octagon in anticipation of a future fight with Makhachev. As Volkanovski and Makhachev came face-to-face, fans got the first glimpse of the size difference between the two. Following the action-packed night of fights, former two-division champion Conor McGregor injected himself into the conversation on Twitter by sharing a picture of Makhachev and Volkanovski with the two belts he once had. This sparked a back and forth between the two men, with McGregor ultimately wishing the champion well before offering him some advice in his pursuit of champ status. Although Volkanovski is without question the best fighter at 145 pounds, many have wondered how his skill set will look at 155, given the fact that he's undersized for the division. With his speed and power, many suspect the transition will be a seamless one, but when it comes to the grappling, many worry about his lack of size. Of course, as a former rugby player who once weighed around 200 pounds, Volkanovski will, without question, have plenty of muscle for the division. One point of interest we couldn't help but reference is Volkanovski's title defense against Brian Ortega. Although Volk did get the job done, there were two instances where Ortega was able to get the takedown, specifically against the cage, where Ortega managed to pull off a takedown from the clinch, and the more obvious of the two when he was caught in a tight guillotine. Although it's an incredibly small sample size, it's something worth noting going into a fight with a clinch-heavy submission grappler like Makhachev. When the two men step into the octagon, who do you think gets the job done? Sound off in the comments below. Beneil Dariush believes UFC doesn't want him to become a champion. Beneil Dariush is currently in the midst of one of the best winning streaks in all of MMA. With his win over Mateusz Gamrot on the main card of UFC 280, Dariush extended his win streak to 8 and moved himself one step closer to a shot at the title. Despite that, he feels as though the UFC does not want him to get a crack at the belt. On a recent episode of Submission Radio, Dariush explained that he felt as though the promotion was using him as a stepping stone for Mateusz Gamrot en route to a title shot. Although he can't pinpoint exactly why the UFC would want to keep him out of title contention, he's confident that's the case.
I think they want to keep me as far as away from the title shot as possible because I don't know. I don't bring the crowd that they want, I guess, or I don't bring enough eyes or whatever it is, or I'm not active enough in terms of engagement. I'm not sure what they're looking for, but I guess I'm not their guy, which is fine. I totally understand. I have a different vision than they do.
Of course, Dariush was initially set to be the fill-in fighter for the main event fight between Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev. The move signaled that Dariush could very well be up next for a lightweight title fight if he emerged victorious from his fight with Gamrot. But after Alexander Volkanovski had his hand cleared by a doctor, the featherweight champion was booked as a fill-in fighter. Without any word from the UFC, Dariush learned about Volkanovski stepping in as the backup just like everyone else, through social media. This has likely created some friction between Dariush and the UFC brass. With no word as to whether or not he'll get a title shot next or a #1 contender fight with the former champion, we can only speculate as to what's next for the streaking fighter. Aljamain Sterling questions if UFC is intentionally trying to find someone to beat him. When Aljamain Sterling stepped into the octagon in the co-main event of UFC 280, nobody could have predicted what would happen next. Just moments into the fight, former champion TJ Dillashaw dislocated his shoulder while trying to defend a takedown. From that moment on, the Funkmaster was in complete control. Unsurprisingly, moments into the second round, Dillashaw's shoulder once again dislocated as Sterling snatched up an anaconda choke that seemed to be incredibly tight. Somehow, Dillashaw escaped before then being finished with shots from his back. Monday morning following the fight, Sterling appeared on the MMA Hour to explain why he feels as though the UFC could be actively trying to find someone to defeat him. Although he isn't quite sold on the theory, he questions why else Henry Cejudo would be returning to fight at 135 pounds instead of chasing history by making his return at 145 pounds.
I like Dana on a personal level, like outside of the cameras and everything.
Okay.
I like Dana.
All right.
But some of the things that he actually says is like beyond like me sometimes. Like you go on record, you say whoever wins this fight is clearly getting the #1 shot because it makes sense.
Right.
After the fight, everything completely changes and then you throw Henry Cejudo in the mix. And I'm just completely confused because I'm just like, this guy hasn't fought in over 2 years. You don't want to give him a title shot to go be triple champ.
Of course, there's been no official word as to who Cejudo will face when he returns to the octagon, with featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski likely fighting at 155 pounds next. Many have predicted that the UFC will circle back around to the idea of an interim title fight between Yair Rodriguez and Josh Emmett, given that the UFC could very well look to have Cejudo make his return against Sterling in a bout for the 135-pound title. Before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love, and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all the latest updates. Dan Hardy reflects on UFC booking Khamzat Chimaev to fight Nate Diaz. Former UFC title contender and commentator Dan Hardy is never one to hold his tongue. Fight fans may remember some time ago, Hardy was on the receiving end of criticism from UFC president Dana White after the fighter turned commentator made a scene while calling for Herb Dean to stop a fight before then having words with the veteran ref. It wasn't the first time Hardy had criticized the UFC, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. During a recent podcast appearance, Hardy spoke about the assassination attempt that was the Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev fight, saying,
"Matching Nate Diaz up with Khamzat Chimaev, we all know what that was. We all knew what that was. Unfortunately, it worked out that fight didn't happen. And then what did we get from Dana the week after? It's a good thing that fight didn't happen. That would have been really bad." Like, yeah, man. Like, I don't have to buy you anymore because I know it's like, you know what you're doing. It was an assassination attempt. Like, they were trying to bury him before he left his UFC contract.
Although things worked out for Diaz, UFC president Dana White has shut down talk of the UFC intentionally reshuffling the card at the last minute. Former fighters Pat Miletich and Brendan Schaub both theorized that the UFC saw the card wasn't selling well and decided to reshuffle things days before the fight. While they may not have been the case, things did ultimately work out as Diaz got the submission win over Tony Ferguson in his farewell fight. And now for our breaking news story of the day. We have Dana White canceling a UFC 282 fight. What do you guys think about this? Let us know down in the comments section below. Charles Oliveira sends message to fans back home in Brazil after heartbreaking defeat. This weekend in the main event of UFC 280, former UFC lightweight champion Charles Oliveira came up short in his quest to reclaim the 155-pound title. After missing weight by half a pound for his title defense against Justin Gaethje earlier this year, Oliveira had the belt stripped from him and began his mission to win back his belt. When he collided with streaking contender Islam Makhachev this weekend, Oliveira found himself in unfamiliar territory. Midway through the second round, Makhachev connected with a short hook that put the former champ down. While other opponents would have been hesitant to go to the ground with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Makhachev quickly swarmed him and snatched up a head and arm choke that won him the fight. Following the loss, the former champion explained that he was willing to fight anyone he had to in order to work his way back to title contention. Immediately after the loss, Oliveira took time to share a message with his Brazilian fans at the post-fight press conference. He spoke in his native language of Portuguese, saying, "I know what it is to actually have thousands of places just shut down to watch me, and I wish I would have given a victory to people in a country that needs it so much and deserves it so much. But 11 losses ago, I basically went back to the gym the same day because I said, I'm gonna go and get this done. And together, for all the people that love me and that root for me and that always support me, they always behind me. We're going to train and we're going to be together in this and we're going to turn things around. And this belt is going to be mine again." So far, there's been no word yet as to who the former champion will fight next. With his win over Mateusz Gamrot on the main card, Beneil Dariush could have secured himself a #1 contender fight with Oliveira. Another possible situation is that Oliveira fights the winner of next month's lightweight fight between Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler. With that being said, of course, Chandler has stated before that he believes the fight has title implications. It'll be interesting to see how things play out. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Who do you think Oliveira should fight next? Today's video was packed with some juicy stories from the fight world. What are your thoughts about what's going on in MMA? Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to see more videos just like this. See you next time.